Hello and welcome to my channel. You know that feeling of an old pair of jeans that fits just right? Well, I don't, or at least I didn't, because I always bought cheap jeans that were comfortable on day one because of all the thin fabric and extra stretch. But they never lasted a year because they would start ripping for no reason and the elastic would just be all stretched out. But last year, I decided to spend a noticeable amount more on Carhartt, Duluth, and Levi pants. And a year later, they're all like new, except for the fact that they have now fitted to my shape, if you will, perfectly. And they are now unbelievably comfortable and again, feel as durable as the day I got them. The amount of money I would have saved if I had just bought nice pants in the beginning is something that I cringe to think about, but will not be forgetting in the future. And the same thing can be said about motorcycles, their parts and accessories and all that. Take tires for example. My Tracer came with some very good Bridgestone tires that lasted 10,000 kilometers. And they sold at 60% the price of the Michelin Road 6s, at least here in Japan. And so, with a 40% savings, they seemed like the logical choice. But then I'll tell you that I got more than double the range and noticeably better performance out of the Michelins in every street riding condition I put them through. And I ride every day of the year, even in a typhoon. So yes, you do need a higher upfront cost. But the fact that you pay half as many tire changes if you're paying professionals to put your tires on, which I personally do not, but the tire itself is going to last significantly longer, and even ignoring the performance, your dollar per kilometer is just going to be favorable on the Michelins. But to take a more significant statement, saving money can actually lose you money. Take for example, right here I have two pairs of gloves. On the surface they look pretty similar. They're both brown, mostly leather, they have protection on the knuckles, on the joints, and they have sliders. But this is double the price of this. This is 1 month old, this is 3 years old. This is still waterproof because, look at the finger, if you can read it, Gore-Tex, guaranteed to keep you dry. And yes, this is the same glove I crashed in, which led me to buying this glove. This is a non-Gore-Tex waterproof glove, which I can tell you, holding this in a cold sink full of water for a minute, I am a little cold but completely dry post-crash. This, holding in the same sink of water for 2 seconds, I am not dry. I am damp, I'm only damp, but I am not dry. Being genuine leather, it held up relatively well in the crash, but the slider is still probably reusable. Carbon, though it looks nice and slides well, I could assume will crack on one impact. And I don't feel a very substantial padding behind the slider like I do on this glove. And more importantly, let's zoom in right here. This is a month-old glove. It's never crashed. The leather is ripped. Why is the leather ripped? There is no padding around the carbon inside the stitching, so it's just the sharp edge of the carbon pressed against the leather. So of course it was going to rip. This has padding. I know because there was a rip here and I repaired it. So now these crashed gloves, I actually do expect to get a lot more mileage out of them and next year hopefully replace them. These brand new gloves, I don't trust. I saved half the money, but after a month it's already trash. And that's kind of what Komine is known for. You save a lot of money, except don't expect to get hardly anything out of it. For those that are saying it's where it's made, well, this is a French glove from 5, but it's made in Vietnam. This is a Japanese maker from Tokyo, but it's made in Pakistan. And as a little bonus, be it not waterproof in a standard riding glove, this is from the Japanese maker RS Taichi, made in China. I am including it because it is hands down the best glove I have ever worn ever. And for those of you that are interested, I'll put an Amazon affiliate link for this RS Taichi Raptor glove in the description. It costs you nothing extra. Feel free to check it out. And before we start saying buy once, cry once, if you saw this recent video about the issue I had with my Motors tire, at just under half the price, my Shinko 804, be it only 1,000 kilometers so far, is a extremely good tire, as far as I'm concerned, on and off-road. So this isn't to say that you can't save money and get a good product. But now take a moment to think, why do you replace your bike? You obviously replace things like gloves because you've crashed and ripped them. But your bike, it's because something better came out, right? Now, if your bike is genuinely in bad shape and always in the shop, yes, replacing it is smart, financially and for your own mental well-being. You want a bike you can trust, and it's not worth doing anything to a bike that just doesn't work. I would know this, because rather than fixing an engine on a bike, I made some cool custom parts out of fiberglass, and the engine never really did get fixed. That's all to say, because my Transalp has an amazing engine, transmission, and overall chassis, at least the dimensions, it is just the suspension that is definitely not awful, but it does let the rest of the bike down for my kind of riding. Now, if I added some premium suspension, and to be clear, I am saying premium, like öhlins or tractive, no stock bike is going to be better, at best comparable. And fun fact, the stiffer suspension that you could add to this bike would take out some of the sag and raise the ground clearance. If you got one of those makers plus 25mm suspensions, even from YSS or Andriani, you would be a comparable ground clearance to the Touareg and the T7, at the cost of some road manners. But I digress to say that better brakes are not necessary on this bike, in my opinion. But on my MT-07, I definitely did want something. So a quick DIY installation of some sintered brake pads, and it became an amazing street bike. But if you are really on that higher echelon, you could have added steel braided brake lines for not too much money. You could have even changed out the master cylinder, and done that all when you needed your normal brake fluid change. And as anyone who's done track or stunt riding can tell you, you really have to do your own setup on any bike you have. So if you have a bike like an MT-07 that you like and just want some brakes, well, if you're really pushing hard, you'll need that on almost any bike you go for. Yes, I know there are some Italians out there telling me about brembo. Fair enough. But rather than buy a whole Ducati, you could just buy a brembo system and put it on your bike. What I'm trying to stick to is that if you like the engine and the basic core of your bike, all genuine upgrades will save you money over the loss of resale and the cost of buying something new, because this bike just isn't where you want to be. And that is why I picked the Transalp. I've done everything I can think of except suspension, and maybe, if I do prefer more road performance, spoked wheels let me re-spoke the rim sizes that I want. I could make it a Supermoto or something in between with a 1917. But to say how much is worth it to put on a bike, take this video of someone putting Keneo wheels on their DR650. That is just a financial loss if he replaces his bike next year. So was it worth the price of putting such high-end wheels on a DR650? Well, again, no, if he's selling it next year. But if that's the one thing that he didn't like about his bike, now he not only has tubeless spoke wheels, but the unquestionably best wheels in the industry that are properly tubeless. And so if that keeps him on the same bike for 10 or 20 more years, yeah, it actually was a pretty good investment. And to the point that I did a very cheap DIY tubeless on my bike, while my front wheel still has no safety bead. And my rear wheel being tape, which did fail on the front, and the front being a sealant that could easily fail, his wheel setup is not going to fail as far as holding air and pressure. But go and watch his video, because he'll explain to you how much more these wheels are than just a tubeless system, and how, perhaps, they're the most reliable part on his Suzuki now. And it's a Suzuki. And seeing a video like his is why, though I know I could just do stiffer springs and different fork oil on my Transalp, putting quality öhlins or the like on front and rear would make the bike so good that it's not even worth considering other bikes in the future. But this isn't the maker's fault. Mass production is for the average customer that probably isn't you and definitely isn't me. The 2024 KTM 790 is too hard of suspension for some riders, while the Transalp is too soft for others. For those of you that don't use knee sliders on the tarmac, or go rock crawling like me, the Transalp might actually be perfect for a casual rider. That is, until the suspension wears out, because this budget-friendly suspension is not serviceable like YSS or öhlins. So at that point, decisions are gonna have to be made, but that's on you. Sell your bike, buy the very expensive OEM, or treat yourself to some Swedish gold. But staying on point of the limitations of the OEM, for some of you, in my Transalp weight loss video, you claim I ruined my bike by taking the windscreen off, even though I've taken it off all my bikes. I don't particularly like windscreens, and I don't spend more than 2% of my riding on highways, and I seriously think I may be highballing that 2%. But an average ADV bike with no windscreen won't sell to enough people for the OEMs to justify it, even if, unlike the competition, the Transalp isn't pretending to have a rally screen, leaving its dash exposed and out in the air, instead being tucked safely inside the fairing. So my removing the windshield really has no effect beyond airflow and the 100% reduction of buffeting. But that's kind of my point. That's where the aftermarket can make the perfect bike for me and only me, or you in this scenario. Not compliant with what others think is right, just the ideal bike for your wants and needs that can keep changing as your wants and needs change, rather than selling it for a 50% loss and buying another bike that loses 40% the day you ride away. And then, if I do stick to quality parts that will last and stand up to my abuse, nothing will be better than what I already have. And that right there will be saving me so much money, the cost of every bike I didn't buy over the next 10 or even 20 years. Heck, my first car was a 30-year-old diesel Mercedes, and the same for my first and second motorcycle. The only issue those bikes really had was one, I crashed on the interstate, and the other got ran over by a freshman who wasn't looking in the parking spot they were backing into. So assuming you've got a reliable bike, the bike will last. It's only a matter of whether or not your love affair lasts with the bike. And like any romance, buying shiny jewelry can't hurt. To everyone who made it this far, make sure you do all the things that you're supposed to do. And if you are someone who can afford to replace your bike every year or so, or do have the spare change for premium parts, go check out my Patreon where you get access to every video early and some videos that never go public. But till next time, if you like the core of your bike and it's reliable, invest in keeping it and upgrade what you don't like. It will save you so much money in the long term. And I guess buying good pants too. Bye bye.